Welcome to the Financial Freedom Podcast, where we interview remarkable people and share strategies for mastering money and living a meaningful life. With your host, Grant Sabatier, creator of Millennial Money and author of Financial Freedom, a proven path to all the money you will ever need.
This episode is brought to you by Topia, the free financial independence tracking app that I designed to help you accelerate your journey to financial freedom. To learn more, search for Topia in the App Store and on Google Play, or visit topia-app.com. That's TOPIA-app.com. Hey everybody, very special guest today on the Financial Freedom Podcast. I have Tiffany Aliche, who is the Budgetnista, one of the most visible faces in personal finance, been in the game for quite a long time, extremely successful at both the content creation game as well as what we're going to talk about today, how you impact millions of lives and change legacies. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, Grant. Honestly, I'm excited to be here.
So let's go back to the beginning. I know you were a preschool teacher. How did you make that transition from your day job to financial educator? Take us back.
So I grew up in a household. My dad was a CFO, and he has his bachelor's in finance, his master's in economics, and he and my mom had 5 girls. So he laid real quick that they had to get us on the money train. And so we talked about money all the time, so much so that as a kid, I thought it was normal. You know, I don't think I realized that people didn't really do that until college when my college roommate had debt collectors calling our dorm room. And we thought it was hilarious because we just used it as an opportunity to do a reverse prank call. Like we put on different voices and all this other stuff. And I remember just coming home one spring break and telling my dad oh, this is what's all the fun things that are happening in colleges, and offhandedly mentioning the debt collectors calling the dorm room. And he was like, what? That's serious. I'm like, is it? And so he was like, yes. So he started to give me advice to give to her. And then I became the go-to on college campus, for financial education advice. And again, I didn't think much of it. I hated my internships. I went to school for business, and I got my bachelor's in business with a concentration in marketing, but I hated all my internships in corporate America. I've always loved kids and I love teaching. So while I was on campus, I worked at the child care center, graduated, decided I wanted to be a teacher, went back to school to get my teaching degree, and back to school again to get my master's in education. And I ended up teaching. I fell in love with preschool. It was what I started with, and I thought, oh, once I get all these degrees, I'll move up. But I really love teaching the babies because they're so great. And what I didn't realize then was I was actually learning to teach, because there's nobody harder to teach than a preschooler. Because there's no point of reference. If you're okay, today we're going to learn A like apple. They're like, what's an apple? You're like, damn. So you got to take it all the way back. So it taught me how to teach. I spent 10 years doing that. But while I was teaching the kids, I was also teaching the parents. Because parents would come to me and say, Miss Tiffany, where I taught was kind of an economically depressed neighborhood. They would ask to borrow money. And I'd be like, what? I am 21, 22. And I'm like, I can't lend you money, but if you come in when the kids are taking a nap, I can take a look at your budget. And so nap time became when I started coaching people financially, just the parents of my kids. And so the Budgetnista was born from that, learning to teach, the hardest sector of human being to teach, but then also helping parents with this financial education that I had garnered through my own experiences and from my household. And when the 2009-10 recession hit, my school was nonprofit based. It lost its funding, so we all lost our jobs. And as I was kind of getting myself on track, those same parents would tell friends, and then friends of friends and friends of friends, go see Tiffany. And one day my best friend was like, you should turn this into a business because you're helping a lot of people. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. She's like, you went to school for business, figure it out. And so the Budgetnista was born. I just started with one-on-ones in my living room and started growing from there.
So what are some of the first steps that you took afterwards? When did you launch the website? When did you get on social media? What are some of those first steps you took to start thinking about scaling the business?
So first step was okay, because back then I was so broke. And I remember I was like, okay, I had to move back home with my parents. I was 29 going on 30. So it's fun time sleeping in my middle school bed. As great as that was, I was like, I need to get out of here because I'd bought a condo when I was 25, but I lost it to foreclosure because of the recession. So I had to move back home. And I remember thinking, I don't want to live here. But a friend of mine was living in this really cute brownstone. And she was like, I'm just renting by the room. I didn't even know you could do that. And she's like, yeah, she was the same age as me. And she had gotten a whole bunch of friends together to rent this, like, I think it was like $2,000 a month for this brownstone. But if you rented by the room, it was $500 a month. So I was like, what can I do to make $500 a month? I think I could charge $100 to do someone's budget. So if I can do 5 people a month, I have rent money. And so that's how it first started. I didn't have these big dreams of making millions of dollars. It was like, can I make $500 a month? I'm living off unemployment. I'm at my parents' house. Thankfully, I had bought my car was paid off because I bought like a used car in my 20s. And so I still had it. So my bills were fairly low, although I did have that foreclosure, so my credit was shot. But I was like, okay, $500 a month. And so this is when social media back then was just on the cusp of leaving. It was really Facebook. That was really the main one. It was on the cusp of leaving, like, it's just for college students to like regular young people. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to use my social media, because back then you were only friends with your actual friends. And I was like, and I was only doing one-on-ones in person. So I would just post and then my friends would see, and so they'd be like, oh, you know what, Tiffany? Yeah. Can I come to your house and you help me? And so it was a real struggle. There's just some months I didn't have enough money for bills. I'm like, well, who's not getting paid this month? And I struggled to really get 5 people signed up because I would do their budget and the budget would say there is no $100 here. And I'm like, well, so I talked to my mentor at the time. And she's a really successful businesswoman. And I was like, well, what should I do? Because this is not working. And she said, you need to start to scale. How can you spend that same hour but helping more people? And she was like, maybe look into getting a contract. And I was like, with who? How? And she was like, well, don't you do a lot of volunteer work? And I did. And she was like, well, those platforms that you volunteer for, what do you do for them? I was like, I don't know. Like, one of them in particular, the United Way, I was volunteering, but I always found myself talking about financial education with the other volunteers. And she's like, well, reach out to them. And I did. We had a sit down and they were like, we'd love for you to teach a financial education class to our employees because, we've heard you talking about it with them. And I'm like, okay, perfect. They were like, how much do you cost? I was like, $600. I just pulled it out of my behind. I was like, $600. And they were like, okay. And I was like, do you guys prepay? Because rent was due. And so one thing I am really good at is teaching. So I came prepared. Like, I went to the dollar store with my little prepaid money and got like folders and printed stuff out. And I was really prepared. And so I did such a good job that they called me back and said employees that were out that day are like super jealous. And they were like, oh, I didn't know we were having someone. Can you bring her back? And I was like, yes. So instead of the $500 a month, now I'm at $1,200 a month. So I was going from one to few. And then, or not a month, but I made $1,200 that month. And I was like, okay. And then the United Way was like, we want to do this for the community. And I was like, okay. And they said, do you have a curriculum? And I was like, yeah, I did not have a curriculum, but I did have my master's in education. So I'm like, I can make one. And they were like, okay, how long is your curriculum? And I was like, 6 weeks. Which I was making up on the spot, and it was like, it's a weekly class and it's 6 weeks long. They're like, okay, send us your curriculum, send us your proposal. And I was like, okay. So I went on Twitter. I never forget. I went on Twitter and I was like, help. I don't know how to make a proposal. Can someone help me? And this is back then when Twitter was also people that you knew, or people, at least Twitter was very much like localized, so a woman who was like worked for the city of Newark. She was a communications director. And I'll never forget, her name was Michelle Thomas. She, because I had done so much volunteer work and I was using social media to get people to come volunteer with me, she's like, I love what you're doing for my city. I will help you to put your proposal in proposal order. And I was like, oh. And so I gave her all my stuff. She put it in like this framework for me that I still use to this day and has generated me hundreds of thousands of dollars and my friends as well, because I share that framework. And so I submitted it to the United Way and they agreed to pay me, I want to say it was like $300, $300 or $400 a class. So I now have this, 3 times 5, this $1,500 contract with United Way. So I'm like, I scale from this one-on-one to one to few. And then I'd written my first book, and I self-published, called The 1 Week Budget. And I was like, you guys should buy the book because the book is in alignment with the class. And they said, sure. And I was like, yes. So then it was like another $500. So now it's $2,000. I did the United Way for 2 or 3 years, and I really learned how to teach adults, which is different, obviously, than kids. I also learned how to check for understanding. We would do a pre-survey and a post-survey, and I learned to take that relationship and to get other kind of like contracts like that. So I started really cooking with grease. And then after 3 or 4 years, I got the itch. How do I scale from one-to-one, one-to-few to one-to-many? And that kind of fell in my lap because one of my friends, his brother had just become the president of his junior class in college. And we were all over there celebrating with him. And he was saying something about, I said, well, what do you do as a president? It's not like, you can't you're not running the campus. He's like, I can, I help to get speakers to come. I was like, speakers, you say? How much do you pay these speakers? He was like, about $1,500 to $25. I'm like, for 1 hour I speak, and he was like, okay. So it was Keene University. I'll never forget. They paid me $2,500. It was like, it was him and a bunch of other students, which I love. They get to decide, the kids, because the faculty or the powers that be kind of give them their money in the beginning of the school year. They have to manage it, supervises. But still, $2,500, that same hour that I sat one-on-one with somebody for $100, that same hour that I did like a session for $300 with the United Way, that same hour paid me $2,500 to one-to-many. So my wheels were turning like, okay, this is scale. And so I started hitting up all these other colleges, like, I can do it. And I realized that you have to really go through students. And then the kind of like the last iteration was, well, how do I remember thinking one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many, one-to-infinite. How do I get as many people as possible to sign up for something that I have, And I realized that I have to do something online. By now, social media was really cooking with grease. And I was really using social media like to market heavily, especially Facebook back then. And I tiptoed into Twitter. And then Instagram became a thing. And so I was really using my social media to do so. And I launched my online school because I thought as many people from around the world can join my online school. It's called the Live Richer Academy. And so I remember when I launched it, I read this book literally called Launch. I'm sure you know, by Jeff Walker. An amazing book. I was so scared because I was like, but the tension that built, it was like people waiting out like for like the new video game or the new Jordans. And I remember that we opened the doors, and I did the Live Richer Academy with a business partner. We opened the doors, and I remember I was like sitting at home. My business partner was over, and we kept pressing refresh. The first half an hour, we made $30,000. I almost passed out. I was like, what? Now, this is now to just so you get a timeline. So by then, I had been maybe like 8 or 9 years in business. So this certainly was not some Cinderella story. Like, it was like all of these lessons along the way. And I want to say that launch netted us, it was like a 5 or 7 day launch, netted us like maybe $70,000 to $75,000. But as a preschool teacher, I never made over $39,000 a year. That was like my peak.
Are you full time at this point doing financial education? You made that leap back in 2010.
Yes, because I was unemployed. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I was just like, I'm unemployed and broke. So I guess I'm an entrepreneur.
I got nothing to lose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was, honestly, it's been such a crazy ride. And since then, I mean, at my business's peak during 2020, we made $10 million that year. Can you imagine? I can't even wrap my mind around that. This is like the Live Richer Academy just by itself. And so it just, but I couldn't have gotten there. But that's, by then it was like maybe like, what is that? 2020. By then I was like, what, 10, 11 years in. So, but I couldn't have gotten there without those one-on-ones getting clear about what people needed. And then the one-to-few to learn how to teach adults, and then the one-to-many to learn how to command, and all these adults and what helps a broader audience. I couldn't have got to one-to-infinite. And I'm still learning to this day, but it's been an amazing, amazing ride.
Yeah, I mean, talk about the power of compounding. I mean, just like immense. So your course has been live, 4 or 5 years?
Like 6, I want to say.
6 years. So you're such an early mover advantage of these technologies, of these platforms. Everyone today just tries to launch and do it all at once, and they've got the Twitter account and then the course immediately. But, they're really not taking the time to build the blocks, to build the loyal audience, to learn. Where does this deep mission to serve come from? Because at the heart of this, to me, you're a mission-driven entrepreneur. You're helping others. I saw one stat on your website. You've helped increase your community's net worth by over $200 million. $200 million. I mean, just think about the amount of time that parents have been able to spend time with their kids, have been able to launch their own new ventures. Just the compounding impact of that wealth creation alone is billions of dollars. So you can't even begin to likely imagine the impact that you have. Where does this mission to serve come from? And I'm saying that through the lens of, you've already accomplished so much. What keeps you going? What keeps you motivated?
It's the same reason why I wanted to become a preschool teacher, a teacher. There was literally this thing in me that was just like, I want my life to mean more than just like, I used to call it like packing boxes, right? So I wanted that when I'm no longer here, that people's lives are better because I was here, And maybe I guess if I could look back, maybe I got that from my parents. They were both immigrants, born and raised in Nigeria, and I see how much they still help their village. And I just grew up with aunts and uncles living with us and us sending money to Nigeria. And, and so I remember right after college, I was just about to graduate, and I went to Nigeria for the first time. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I have so many advantages over my cousins. And they work so hard and are so smart. And I was just so lazy. And I just remember, and they were so grateful. Everything was like, it just really highlighted how much I had been given. And I didn't want to waste it. And when I got back from Nigeria, I watched this documentary on Mr. Rogers, oddly enough. And I remember, who doesn't love Mr. Rogers? And I remember on his wall in his office, it said, there was a picture frame of a quote, and it said, "The purpose of life is to live a life of service." And something in me lit up and said, "That's it. I want to live a life of service." And so that's why I became the teacher, because I was like, this is service. And it took me a while to realize that service did not mean martyrdom. The service did not mean I had to be broke, because that's what I thought. I was like, well, you're a nun. You've taken a vow of poverty, Tiffany. You're going to be a teacher. You know what I mean? But then as time went on, I realized that I could be of service, and somehow that doesn't mean that I'm excluded from growing wealth as well. But that's what motivates me now more than anything, has always motivated me. Because when things were really rough, my first year in business, to put it into perspective, I want to say I made $12,000 or $15,000 gross. So that's like $5,000 take home, second year in business, $30,000, which is like what, $10,000 take home, or give or take. And so, but the thing that kept me going was so many people kept coming to me and saying, "You really helped me, Tiffany. I was really afraid and scared. You really helped me." And so it's the thing that, despite that I call myself semi-retired now, because I stepped down as CEO from my online school, and I have this amazing woman, Tamara, who's been with me from the beginning of that school. So I, elevated her to CEO, and she's rocking out. And so I just spend my time doing what I want to do. I lean heavily more into my original business, which is the Budgetnista. I call it the business of Tiffany. And so I guess I just get to do, what do you want to do, Tiffany? Do you want to do that speaking? I love speaking and teaching. Sure. Do you want to do that other thing? Nah. And so now I really literally just get to serve in however capacity that I want to serve.
It's interesting. I'd love to get your thoughts on Tiffany, the brand, the Budgetnista, the brand, the personality. I can't imagine how many thousands of interviews and podcasts, you've done. It didn't take me long, maybe interview 300 or 400, where I was completely burnt out. I was done. I felt like I couldn't share another thought about making more money or investing or budgeting. I felt like I'd reached the edge of what I was interested in talking about, and I could no longer speak about it without sounding like a caricature of myself. I never wanted to be a personal brand, never set out to be that, reluctantly had to embrace that part when I realized that people naturally are inspired by and attach themselves to a piece of content that you've created. And so How do you deal with that side of the business, that side of being recognized? What is it to you?
I think, Grant, for me, it's because I really I don't believe in any coincidences. There's a reason why I was called or like moved to teach first, because that's what you are as a teacher. Like when I taught my 3 and 4 year olds, if they saw me at like Target or Walmart, they're like, "Oh my God, it's Tiffany!" Like so. And parent, even to this day, like I feel so old now because some of my students are like 13, 14, and they're like, "Is that Miss Tiffany?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, how are you such an adult?" But they're parents too, and so I learned to manage the expectation that comes when you teach someone, because you literally become part of their story now. And so for 10 years, and I know we all have heard of what's his name? I love his books, the 10,000 hour rule guy, Malcolm Gladwell, right? Yes. And so, so I literally got to practice that in the classroom of like becoming like the go-to, I'm ingrained in your life. I love Miss Tiffany. So I got to practice like how to manage that emotion there. So by the time I got out into the world of the adult world, like it felt very familiar to this is what it's like with my 3 and 4 year olds. When they catch me like just walking down the street because I might live close to them or whatever. And for me, one of the reasons why I think I excelled at teaching preschool is I have naturally a ton of freaking energy. I mean, I don't even know, like even now I probably walk, like sometimes I'll take like 3 walks a day because I'm just like, because I don't have as much to do now since I stepped down as CEO. So I'm like literally buzzing all over. I'm like, yeah. And so I think that like, because I really love teaching. I cannot express like, I know everyone doesn't have like a thing they love, but for me, I love teaching so much so that it's like it's oozing out of me. So I keep having to find places to put it, like a bottle, right? I'm just like I have a podcast, Brown Ambition. I'm like, okay, there. The book came out, Get Girl with Money, there. Okay, like the website. So I love teaching, and so for me, it actually feels uncomfortable to hold the information in. I feel ready to explode. Like I took a few months off when I didn't do anything. I just went to Bali for 2 months. And it took everything in me not to go live because I learned a lesson when I was at the waterfall. To be like, oh my God, guys. So I learned this lesson. And I'm like, Tiffany, you are here to decompress. And so for me, I just think it's just personality. Like I'm not capable of keeping like knowledge to myself that it feels bad and stuck. I need to release something. Like I need to release the things. So the other day, my sister was like, "Only you, Tiffany, would launch a 6-figure business in 24 hours." Because I was like, you know what? I want to start mentoring. I already have like 10 mentees, but everyone always, especially women, will ask me to mentor them in business. And so I was just like, how do I, same thing, I'm like one-to-one, but how do I increase my ability to mentor more? But I don't want to really so much about the financial component. I don't want to turn this into the whole thing, you know? So I was like, you know what? Patreon's super easy. I'm like, I'm not going to do what they tell you, which is 3 tiers. It's just $10 a month, and there's no 3 tiers. I'm like, I'm just doing it because I want for it to be accessible. And, and I'll use the money for like a passion project. I wrote a children's book about like personal finance children's book for like little ones. And I'll use it to fund that. And so I launched it thinking like maybe like a month or so ago, I was like, okay, my goal is maybe we'll get 1,000 people by the end of the year. Within 24 hours, 1,000 people had signed up. I was like, and my sister did the math. She was like, okay, 10,000 times, or $10 times 15, well, no, yeah, $10 times 15, or now we're at 1,500, but at the time, 1,000 people, that's $10,000 a month. That's $120,000 a year, give or take. Of course, there's churn and people leave, but it just taught me that like leaning into what I love, which is teaching, that it's like the bank for me. I can always bank on the fact that, I just feel like that's just the way I'm built and wired. So as long as I do that, because there have been times when I veered and then I'm like, this is misaligned. And I have to bring myself back to, Tiffany, I know that might make you more if you do that, but 1, you don't need more. 2, it just feels terrible. Go back to teaching and you'll always be on track.
So do you miss being inside the course? Are you still creating content and teaching to that community now that you've stepped back, or what's your relationship now with that community?
So yeah, so I'm still there. Like I honestly, I coach one of my mentees is Tamara, the new CEO, and so I still teach my class there. But like I'm just like one of the teachers. What I don't miss at all is I hated the. I don't want to say hated, and I was a good CEO, but I didn't like it. I wanted to teach because I would have to literally be doing, I'm in the budget meeting and be like, well, actually, let's save here and let's trim here. And then I had to turn it off and be like, I'm on CNN. Hi, my name's, so it was, it was such a weird, and I enjoyed the being on the CNN, but I really didn't love, there was so many damn meetings because at the time at our peak, I want to say our team was like 25 people strong. And so, you're like, you're meeting with the marketing team and then the finance team. And then what about this? And then growth and scale. And I don't want to go back there. And I'm glad I did it because it taught me another level of leadership. And it taught me for the Budgetnista, the team is really small. It's myself, my admin, and my content manager, Logan. And it's just the three of us. And I told them no meetings. That if you have me in a meeting in front of a Zoom, you better have a PowerPoint where you're like, you need to visually show me something. If you just have a question, call me because I might be walking through Target. I'd rather do that. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like I take a walk every day. I live by this beautiful lake and I'm like, don't have me sitting in front of the computer so you could drone on. Like if you have something to say, just text, hey Tiff, can we jump on a call? Because I might be like, sure, I'm walking by the lake. We could jump on a quick call. So I love that I get to recreate how it's much smaller, the business, but I don't care. It feels like really good and aligned.
So how do you manage a $10 million course? You said 25 people. What's the mixture of full-time and contractors? And to me, that sounds like a headache. At one point, I had 38 full-time employees, and it was the bane, not in my money business. This is when I had my marketing agency. It was kind of the bane of my existence, honestly, just putting out fires constantly. Yeah, exactly. What was the mixture of full-time, part-time that you passed off to your CEO?
So at the time, it was like 17, full-time. And yeah, I know, honestly.
That just stresses me out, and I have nothing to do with this. I'm like, literally, I just felt my cortisol level rise.
Oh my God.
When you said that.
It was a lot. 17 full-time, and then the rest were like a mix between part-time and contract workers. And what I realized is, one, to be a really good CEO, you have to be a good combination of head and heart. And the truth is, I'm way too much heart, if I'm being candid. I'm the type to just give her a raise. Yeah, and they were like, Tiffany, the numbers. I'm like, wait, what? And so it just got to be, and I would, if you would give me a good sob story, I'm giving you a job. It'd be like, no, but her son is needing to, and so we'll find a space. I'm like, well, what is her skill set? So we had a lot of people and it was hard because I had to reduce our team. Because there were just a lot of people who weren't working, and they were great and they were kind and they were nice, but I'm like, Tiffany, that's not the same thing as, people working. And so we had to reduce the team. That was the hardest thing, because, I like to get to know the people who I work with, so I know their family. I know they just bought a house. So that was really, really hard, but it was either that or the company will start to sink under the weight of folks who are not doing what you need them to do, because then it doesn't leave you space to hire the people that you do need. So we're way lighter now. So it's definitely not 25, maybe even half that. And, like I said, on the Budgetnista side, it was maybe, I want to say Budgetnista, maybe it was 10. And now we're down to just the three of us, which I love, and plus I learned that everybody doesn't need to be a full-time employee. I used to be the queen of, I need a project done. Now you work for us. And I'm like, yeah, but the project is done, Tiffany. And now they're just sitting around this paycheck is amazing every month that I get for doing nothing.
I love how you separate them as well. Everything that I've done was always very intertwined. after selling Millennial Money, now I have a new business and there are 5 of us. Everyone's a partner. We're not going to ever hire on a full-time employee. I want people to be able to manage themselves. I'm just trying to build my new businesses around my life as opposed to the other way around. And I know that things are getting done without me even needing to think about them or focus on them. I'm sure you got approached to sell your course in your company at least a few times.
No, never.
Never?
Never
What?
once for Budgetnista, never once for the Literature Academy, never, ever, ever.
What?
I know.
Oh my gosh. Course valuations have skyrocketed over the past 2 years.
Yeah, no, here's the thing. I'm open. I mean, right now we're making a huge pivot to something that I feel is more solid. We're making a pivot toward like contracts because right now we rely heavily on digital marketing to get our, the people signed up. And I want to create that's kind of like there's 2 ways to me that I like to see business. It's like slow and steady wins the race, and then rocket ship growth. And we have leaned so heavily into rocket ship growth, which is exhausting and stressful, but it's rocket ship growth, And so I am introducing the slow and steady, not to replace rocket ship growth, but to hedge against. Because, it's like easy come, easy go. And so one of the ways that we're hedging against that is that we have a couple of contracts with colleges. And so we're going to start to become I want to become the go-to for so it's like Literature Academy College Edition, Literature Academy Church Edition, Literature Academy Corporate Edition. And so if I can have half to 70% of our income coming from these solid places, and then the rocket ship growth, if it grows, great. If it's not, we're still fine. But this can push us forward versus using rocket ship growth for maintenance as well as growth. And so that's where we're headed toward now. So I, hopefully, honestly, I'm open in the next 5 to 10 years to, not now just because we're making the transition, but 5 to 10 years to selling the company for a ton of coin.
It's interesting to hear that you use paid as such a heavy acquisition channel, just given the popularity of your podcast and, your book, Get Good with Money, and your media appearances and your website. I would think that organically you'd be getting so much interest and feed that you wouldn't need to use paid or want to use paid. How do you think about the diversity of sort of an organic sale versus a paid sale? And are you just doing the paid to kind of balance out and just because the opportunity is there? Or, I would think you could, with your reach, have a $10 million a year course without needing to spend any money.
The issue really for us is that there are 2 companies, the Budgetnista, that can do that.
Right.
I'm showing with this Patreon. I'm I have Patreon. Oh, 1,000 people.
Right.
And then there's a Literature Academy, which is not me. And when I built it, I purposefully, if you were to join the Academy just cold off the street, you would just be oh, that Budgetnista girl's in there. And so, but that was intentional because I didn't want to be the sun, moon, and stars for another business and not be able to remove myself. Because I always knew for the Academy, one day I want to sell it. And I didn't want a company to be well, we kind of need you to stay on for 2 years because no. Right. So as a result of that, we've been finding our way of how do you attract. So we do still use my image. I'm not going to say that we don't, but not as much as so for the, like I said, for the Budgetnista, I show up fully as myself. And to your point, you're right. For the Budgetnista, there's 0 paid. I've never run an ad for Budgetnista. We just don't. We don't need to. Mm-hmm. But for the Academy, we've really been right now we're leaning into what we call the Peloton model, which is okay, can we get each of these instructors to be their own superstar? So that's what we've been practicing, those types of things. And so, that's why, because in the beginning, it was they were Siamese twins, these 2 companies. Yeah. So it's the Academy needed Budgetnista, at least for that initial sign up,
Sure. Yep.
And then they became twins. Mm-hmm. And I was okay. And now they're finally siblings on their way to cousins. So that's so we've been, every year we talk about that, okay, you can't lean so heavily on me. You have to stand on your own too. And so one of those ways is paid ads. So what does that look like? And, they still use me sometimes in paid ads, and we're exploring using other instructors in paid ads, but also too, can we get these contracts and even then when I get a college contract, it's because I've spoken there as Budgetnista and I'm hey, right. I use that, but I want to, like I said, I want to get away from, I'm hoping in the next 2 years, somebody will join the Academy and never even know that I somehow was a part of it. That's the aim. So that's why you see such a, we spend so much money on ads, but it makes me, I don't particularly care for digital marketing being like the core way that you get folks, because the rules keep changing.
Right,
Um,
right.
and so, like, that's why I say I don't do that on the Budgetnista side, and that makes several million
Mm-hmm.
dollars a year on its own without any spent money on
Right.
marketing. So, but I understand, like, with this school, it's a little bit different. So, but I'm shifting like what that looks like, and the truth is we have to make a drop from like 10 to like maybe this year we'll probably cross over the $5 to $6 million mark. But I knew that pivot looks like that.
So then how does the Budgetnista make money? I would have suspected that in Get Good with Money, you'd have the, hey, now to learn more, here's my course. How does the Budgetnista make money as its own business?
So the Budgetnista, there used to be so many different avenues, and then I chopped them all down, and I was like, list every way we're making money, and I was like, these are not even really making money. These 20 different avenues. So now there's like core. So it's speaking engagements. So because now I charge a pretty penny. Like if you want me to do a keynote, we just went from 50,000 to 65,000. For a keynote, and they pay. Like so that's one. Two, spokesperson work and brand ambassadorship. Like now I'm at a point now where the average contract is 6 figures at a minimum. So most of the contracts are multiple 6 figures. I'm like, okay, it's solid. Two, I wouldn't honestly say books are as small, even though I have to say like my contract was a really good one and my second one will be even better. Books play a small role because this is only my first book. So it's not like I'm like doing a bunch of different, contracts when it comes to books. But I will say sales are steady. Not so much for this book, I think this is the year I'll have earned out we're 1 year in, I'll have earned out like my advance. And so I'll see that. But as far as like I have self-published books that are on Amazon and they make a few $1,000s a month. So it's nice, but it's not a core. Patreon is still starting to cook with grease. So, that's not a huge component, but I'm like, it's only been a couple of months. So I'm like, we'll see where this leads if I really wanted to, but I'm resisting the urge to like entrepreneur it out and be like 5,000 people by the end of the year. That's $500,000. I'm like, no, Tiffany, because you wanted space and time. But I know that like I told myself probably in the next 5 years or so, I could probably get Patreon or something similar if I don't stay on that platform to like 7 figures a year. I'm not saying I could probably do it within a year if I really like buckle down, but I'm like, at what cost? But so it's Patreon. And then too, and yes, an affiliate. So we have our blog. I'm redoing my blog because I'm like, we hired this really great guy that's going to do all our SEO. And he was like, you have so much great material. You don't even have to write anything new for a couple of years because you have so much material. Let's just position it. Truthfully, where I see, because I was asking him the other day, what is like my dad would say all roads lead to Rome. Like what is Rome on the blog? Like where are we leading people to? And yes, it's affiliate links, but mostly it's our email list. That's where we actually close so many of our deals. If I want to launch something, I hit up that email list. I mean, and like, so that's really where, so like I said, like it's spokesperson work, and brand ambassadorship, speaking, Patreon, the books, and then it'll be like, the affiliate stuff once the blog is up and running. And, that's enough to generate just a few $1 million a year with only 3 of us. And so that's more than enough, because I can remember when I made my first 7 figures as take-home pay, and we had to make way more than $3 million in order for that to happen, because with all the other employees and everything else. So it's so weird to see the Budgetnista so pared down. Like, if you just make $2 million, Tiffany, you can take home $1 million. And it's like, okay, but I had to make like 6 to take home $1 million over here. And you're like, oh, this is way less work, and I can take home, like the same pay. So it's been really fascinating to kind of watch the Budgetnista navigate. And I mean, I have some potential TV stuff on the line.
Even in my case, I used to make money 20 different ways. Once I unlocked the SEO game, and then you wake up and you've made like $7,000 before you had coffee, and you're like, this is cheating. And then you find someone to buy that out.
Yes. I cannot wait for that to happen. Honestly,
it's pretty remarkable space. But once I figured that out, then it was like, I don't know if I want to do, the brand partnerships are tough. Some of that stuff's kind of fun, but then the requirements on the back end where it's like, you need to create this 1 20-minute video, and there's like 8 back and forths, and you're like 200 hours in, and you're like, oh geez, this was not fun. So a lot of people see those things, and yes, they can be profitable. But the bigger the brand, the more hoops you're going to have to jump through, the more legal headaches. And it's not, at least for me, all that it's cracked up to be. So I'll do 1 or 2 a year if it's fun. But the great thing about having a platform, and my personal brand isn't nearly at the scale of yours, is that you can pick and choose. If you're just out there, then opportunities show up, and the ones you want to do, you can do. And, just like you're saying, the ones you don't want to do, you don't have to do.
And you set the parameters now, because you're right, to your point, because brands will be like, ooh, look at this money. And you're like, oh, okay. Or I'm like, I'm hip to the game. I'll ask, I'm like, what are the requirements? I have a really good brand agent. And so she knows, because brands love to get on 20 different phone calls just to be like, right? I'm like, no, we have a limit of how many phone calls, how long they can be. Anything above that, I charge for consulting. So anything above that is consulting hours pay, and so that's tens of thousands. And so I've gotten really good at don't waste my time or it's going to cost you.
Tiffany, this has just been really exciting for me. I've been following your journey. I learned a lot from you. Certainly when I was just getting started and doing media, I remember watching your media interviews and when you were on TV, before I was on TV, the energy, the infectious energy is something that I certainly learned from you. You got to play it up when you're on TV, when you're doing the interviews, you got to get super excited. I want to thank you for that and feel like I've been a couple steps behind you this entire way. So I want to thank you for the path that you've paved. Congratulations on the success of your book. Everyone go out and get good with money and check out the Live Richer Academy, where you may or may not find Tiffany, but I'm sure she's in there somewhere. Check out Brown Ambition, the podcast, and don't forget to follow the Budgetnista on all of the social media platforms. Tiffany, it's a real pleasure, a real honor. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Grant.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review, and I would love your help getting the word out. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.